Okay, so we're going to make a start. So my name's Theo Mitchell. I provide the Secretariat to support for PRASEG. For those of you that don't know, PRASEG is the all-party renewable and sustainable energy group based in the Houses of Parliament in the UK. We currently represent around 130 MPs and peers from across both houses, and we're chaired by Bim Afellami MP. Bim was due to chair today's session for us, but has been delayed by a bill committee and will be with us shortly. In his absence, I'll just make the initial introductions and then hand over to Dr. Birol for his presentation. So just a very quick bit of background. Today's webinar is the third of 6 meetings that we're running ahead of the summer parliamentary recess in the UK. At a high level, what we're trying to do is consider the responsibilities, opportunities and challenges of the UK energy industry as it responds to the dual challenges of COVID-19 and climate change. We're particularly interested in identifying the challenges that the sector's faced so far, how it might respond, and what the specific opportunities are where we could deliver maximum benefit in terms of economic recovery. Today's session is going to bring an important international context to this programme. The IEA has itself transitioned from being an organisation established initially to ensure the security of the world's oil supplies to now providing one of the key intergovernmental forums steering the world towards a sustainable energy future. We're absolutely delighted to have Dr. Fatih Birol with us today, who's been with the IEA for more than 20 years and has risen through the ranks to the role of chief economist before his nomination as executive director. As well as advising the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, amongst others, Fatih was also named the Financial Times Energy Personality of the Year in 2017. Fatih's going to talk to us today about the IEA's recent analysis of the COVID-19 pandemic and their recent Sustainable Recovery Plan, which was published last week. So without further ado, Fatih, I'll hand over to you now for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the group for inviting the International Energy Agency. So I would like to start to say the following. First, what is the impact of COVID on the energy sector and that of emission trends? This is number one. And the second, what is next for the energy sector from COVID, after COVID? So these are the two things. First, the damage assessment of COVID and the energy sector. We are known as the organization of numbers and facts. So what we have done at the IEA, we look at the data to understand the order of magnitude of the damage on the energy demand, oil, gas, renewables, electricity, and impact on the emissions. So what we expect this year, global energy demand will decline sharply. To put in a context, 7 times larger than it did after the financial crisis in 2008. So this year's decline in global energy demand will be 7 times larger than the decline we had after the financial crisis. Just to put it in a context, among all the fuels, IEA is an organization which looks all the fuels, all the technologies. Among all the fuels, the biggest hit comes on oil. Why? Because oil gets the hit because of the economic meltdown, as it is the case for other fuels. But on top of that, the lockdown around the world had a major implication on transportation sector, which represents 60% of global oil consumption. So therefore, big drop on oil demand we are expecting this year. Natural gas, very strong decline, the strongest decline since Second World War. COVID, but also rather mild weather around the world push the gas demand numbers down. Coal, big hit around the world. One of the main reasons is that China was the epicenter of the COVID. And as we all know, China consumes half of the coal in the world. China consumes 50% of the coal, other 50% everybody else put together. India also had a big hit, so therefore coal is also going down. Renewables, one good news here, renewables is the only fuel that showed an increase. Small increase, but still an increase, unlike the others. It is mainly because in many countries, renewables are preferred as the first fuel to be connected to the grid, as an obligation in many countries. Now, these are the pictures in terms of energy demand. In terms of carbon dioxide emissions, we estimated, and it has been confirmed, that the global emissions will decline about 8%, which means, in practical terms, the increase in the global emissions in the last 10 years will be erased by the decline this year. So 2020 decline will erase the emissions growth in the last 10 years globally. But in my view, this is not a reason to be cheerful, because this decline is not happening as a result of right government policies, right technological innovation. It is happening because of the economic meltdown and the premature deaths around the world. And there is no guarantee that it will not rebound sharply, as we have seen in the year 2010 after the financial crisis. Now, this is the first chapter. What is the impact of COVID on fuels, on the emission trends, and also in terms of investments? We have seen an unprecedented decline in global energy investments, and we expect throughout the year global energy investments will decline by 20%, which is about $400 billion US dollar. Again, another aspect of the damage assessment. Now, after assessing the damage, we look at what is next. Some of you may know, and I hope you know, IEA was the first to lead the call around the world to put the clean energy transition at the heart of the stimulus packages around the world. Why we were the first one? Why we were so vocal? Because I believe this is once in a lifetime opportunity. Why? Because trillions of dollars of money will be injected in the economy. As we stand now, 9 trillion is already on the table, and we expect at least another 10 towards the end of the year. About 20 trillion US dollars will be injected in the economy. What kind of energy policies will be included in this package will determine the future of energy and future of our emission trends. It is the reason why we have prepared a sustainable recovery plan for the world, working together with the International Monetary Fund. Why working together with the IMF? Because we know very well that the many governments around the world, the climate change may not be their first and foremost preoccupation. They are also worried about the economic growth. They are also worried about the jobs employment issue. So we said, what kind of energy policies need to be put in place to address these three big challenges we are facing? Economic growth, jobs, and climate change. Because we know, as I said, governments are going to make hugely consequential decisions in a short period of time in terms of recovery packages. When we look at all the energy policies that could be implemented within the next 3 years, we focus on the next 3 years, 21, 22, 23. What kind of concrete energy policies can be put in place to boost economic growth, create jobs, and reduce the emissions? We have came up with a list of policies, but 3 of them are critical. Number 1, efficiency improvement, especially in the buildings. Efficiency improvement, buildings, and in the industry sector, especially manufacturing sector, light manufacturing, and others. This is a job machine. It creates a lot of job, renovation of the buildings, and efficiency in the improvement in the industry. This is number 1. Number 2, acceleration of the renewable technologies, installations, namely solar, wind, and others. Number 3, modernization and strengthening of the electricity grids. We have all understood how indispensable electricity is for our lives during the COVID problem. And the increasing share of renewables require stronger grids. Therefore, we have chosen grids as the 3rd piece of our long list of our recommendations. But these 3, efficiency, renewables, and grid modernization, are the 3 important elements. And as a result of those, we see that in 3 years of time, we can boost the global economy on average each year about 1 percentage point. Second, we can create jobs, 9 million jobs each year. Third, and this is very important, we can avoid the rebound of the emissions and make the 2019 definitive peak of global emissions and pave the way for the net zero goal that many countries have subscribed to. So this is the result of our sustainable recovery plan, and I am very grateful for many governments around the world, developed or advanced governments, who have quickly joined the forces and endorsed our recovery plan, as well as several investors, responsible investors, and many other stakeholders around the world. So, dear colleagues, in this last 10 minutes, I wanted to share with you how we see the damage assessment of COVID in the energy sector and what kind of recovery plan we are proposing for the world, for the governments around the world. If you have questions on this and other issues, I will be very happy to take them on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fatih. A fascinating presentation and a fascinating report too. I'm now going to hand over to our Vice Chair, Alan Whitehead MP, and it should be said on the record that we're incredibly grateful to Alan for stepping in at such short notice to just step up and just chair this session at the moment. So Alan, can I hand over to you now? And we're particularly interested in any questions you might have about the IEA's work, about Fatih's presentation just now, and how it relates to what's coming up in the UK. Thank you.
Right, sorry, I was just muted then. Thanks very much, Theo. I would emphasise, indeed, I have stepped in at the very last moment. I'm afraid Bim was not able to be with us this afternoon for very particular reasons. So hope I can step in the breach adequately this afternoon. And Fatih, thank you very much indeed for your presentation, which I thought was absolutely bang on as far as what we need to do at the moment, as far as I wouldn't exactly say taking advantage of the pandemic and its consequences, but actually understanding where we are as far as particularly energy outputs are concerned, and how that relates to our targets for net zero. And of course, we are in the UK now in a position to think seriously about net zero, having agreed in Parliament last year that we were going to transfer the 80% target down to net zero, with all that entails. And of course, that does entail quite a lot of different approaches, particularly concerning negative carbon coming into the equation to ensure that any carbon overhangs that you've got, this particular date, 2050, I think it should be before then, are taken account of in, as it were, the overall carbon account. So I think, Fatih, the first question I would like to put to you, and indeed I think this probably will be on behalf of everybody here. How do you think that the plan you have put forward in your report specifically relates to the UK, bearing in mind the particular position we are in with our net zero strategy for the future, and bearing in mind the progress that's been made in some areas, power sector particularly, but the lack of progress in other areas, and particularly set out by the Committee on Climate Change's report, which has just come out today, and that sets that out, I think, fairly succinctly.
Thank you very much for the question. I think our plan would, in my view, is tailor-made. It's a tailor-made for UK as well. And for the following reason, UK is going to put a recovery plan, and there is a almost unanimous agreement among the political parties to push the climate change agenda. But also in the UK, we know that the UK economy needs to rebound. And also in the UK, we know that the jobs is an issue and will be often an issue in the next years to come. So therefore, when I look at the UK, renovation of the buildings is a key issue. A big chunk of the buildings are rather old age, and they have been built before strict building standards have been implemented. So there is a room for renovation of the buildings. There is a room for improvement in the efficiency in the industry sector. Second, in terms of renewables, UK made very strong achievements in terms of renewables, but there is still a big room, especially on the wind sector, and we can well see wind can benefit from the recovery package as well as solar. And third, electricity grids. I think this is the network in the UK needs to be modernized, renovated, rehabilitated, and strengthening. And therefore, I think this is also very important for UK, our suggestion. But on top of those, I believe, I mentioned only these three in my introductory remarks, but there are some technologies that the UK may also want to put emphasis. I want to mention two of them here. One of them is the carbon capture, utilization, and storage. This is a very important technology. And if there are countries in the world which can push it strongly, one of them can be UK. And the other one is the batteries, the electric cars could be another area for UK to consider. But our top 3 suggestions: efficiency improvements, especially in buildings, grid modernization, network modernization, and the renewables are tailor-made for the UK needs, I would say.
That's it so happens that that's exactly the things that, well, certainly from my party in the UK, we're looking for as the centerpiece of what would be a COVID green recovery, building back better plan. And indeed, that is firstly the question of how you move from the present, should we say, pretty patchy piecemeal system of energy efficiency and insulation uprating standards of UK, both housing and industrial facilities, how you do that rapidly and how you do that on a much wider spread basis. And bearing in mind, of course, the UK has got some of Europe's particularly worst insulated and most energy efficient properties around. So the question there, I think, is how you do it and how quickly you can do it and using what resources, and whether you do it on an area basis, whether you do it through local authority-led arrangements, or whether you do it property by property or whatever. So I think that's one important point in terms of the detail of how that happens. As far as renewables are concerned, then I guess as far as the UK is concerned, that's really a question of just of upping the auctions, upping the extent of the auctions, actually getting the capacity deployed at the earliest possible stage, and putting through the regulations and arrangements actually allow that to happen, and bringing then the investment that will follow from that on the back of that particular program. As far as grids are concerned, yeah, absolutely. Recent reports about the unpreparedness, particularly of the distributed grids, for a net zero environment in which the inputs will come in an entirely different way. The way the grids will work will be entirely different. The smartness with which we're expecting the system to work with will be entirely different. And indeed, the balancing processes will be different as well. So do you have any sort of additional thoughts you might want to add about how we're going to do those things in the UK context, which actually takes advantage of the position we know we're in and how far we've got to move and how fast, and what the particular factors that we might put into that, as it were, overall offer can be to make sure it works as well as it should?
I think the only thing I would say is that none of these 3 suggestions we have requires discovery of new technologies or creating additional new institutions or needs new legal framework. They just need to be strengthening, speeding up of the existing mechanisms in place. And I would, if I have to put emphasis on one thing, of course, I work on energy and climate change is very important for me. But I know that the finance minister or the men and women in the street, they may have other considerations as well, such as the economic growth and the jobs. It is very important for the UK government, in my view, or UK administrations, decision makers, to make sure that the people understand these energy-related measures are, of course, going to lead emissions to come down, but they will at the same time boost the economic growth and create jobs. This have to be, in my view, every step, every decision, measures taken should have a dimension, a calculation of how much jobs it is going to create. And this is not very difficult. This is, in fact, easy, what we are doing at the IEA. Germany, after the unification, made this renovation of the buildings a big master plan, and it was one of the source of employment in Germany after unification with the East Germany. United States, in the Obama time, after the financial crisis, they made a big push for the solar and wind, created a lot of jobs. I mean, this is, we do not need, we should understand this and make the public understand that we do not need to discover new technologies, just well-designed, smart policies in a speed-up manner, which will also create jobs and boost the economy, and at the same time, reduce the emissions. One final thing. I am talking with many governments around the world after our plan, and some of those governments do not put the climate change as a top issue, which is fine. Every government has their own priorities. But I tell them, even climate change is not your major concern. You should still stick to these 3 points we are suggesting, because they will be boosting the economy, and energy efficiency is a job creating machine. So they will still do this in order to boost the economy and creating jobs, leave aside the climate benefits. And I stop here.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, in terms of one of the key things that's going to be central to the green revival, it has to be based on jobs. It has to be based on getting people back to work, getting people in work who have been either furloughed or have lost their jobs entirely. And indeed, I think a number of these projects can be brought forward at a pretty early stage to undertake that sort of imperative. So absolutely with you there on that. Now, I think Alan Brown is, I hope, with us this afternoon, and may have a question for you, Fatih. I don't know. Is Alan on the line with us?
Hi, Alan. No, Alan's not with us yet. He is on his way. In the meantime,
right,
though, can I just take the opportunity to put forward a question that BIM did ask?
Yeah.
So, Fatih, in the IEA Sustainable Recovery Plan, it obviously highlights probably 2 million jobs that could be created in energy efficiency and buildings, as you've already alluded to. One of the questions that I think politicians and government is grappling with is identifying where the source of these workers will come from. And I'd be interested in your thoughts to understand whether those 2 million jobs that might be created are they being fulfilled by people that are employed by other sectors within the energy industry, for example, in oil and gas or in utilities, or are they people that are coming from the existing kind of unemployed workforce?
I think most of them could come from the unemployed workers, and it can create also a full-time job for them. And in fact, as I said, this is not a big discovery of our agency, of our report. It has been again and again proven in many countries. Again, Germany is a very good example here. US 10 years ago, a very good example here. And I know that the European Green Deal is based on one of the key dimensions is creating jobs through that. And one important additional issue here, the efficiency improvement in the buildings, including insulation, will also help the another sector, relevant sector, which is in a very difficult time, which is the construction sector. It can also create some additional benefits for the construction sector, where bulk of the workers will come, so unskilled laborers, and of course, it can also come from the different energy sector, such as oil, gas, or some cases electricity, but big chunk of it is unskilled laborers, which is perhaps the most vulnerable segment of the unemployed population. Thank you.
Okay. And Alan Cairn, so is Alan with us, Theo?
No, Alan was with us, but has had to drop off for a constituency.
Okay, right. Well, can I perhaps then go into some of the questions that we've received on the Q&A bit, which I will have to relay to Fatih, but hopefully that will be okay. I mean, one of the key ones we've had in, particularly from Guy Ransom, is question. I mean, this relates to the question of uprating the energy efficiency of homes and so on. He is particularly concerned about the role of heat pumps in that, and notes that he doesn't think in your report there's too much mention of heat pumps as far as that uprating is concerned. How would you see the role of heat pumps in terms of making sure that you have the range of arrangements for energy efficiency in homes installed, or do you think that perhaps heat pumps don't play such a great role in the energy efficiency process?
Heat pumps, thank you very much for the question. Heat pumps would and should play an important role in terms of the A, energy efficiency improvement, B, as a source of employment, and C, as a reduction of emissions at the end of the day. Why it is not mentioned as one of the top three is that the others are, in terms of scale, global scale, plays a much bigger role. But when it comes to certain countries, heat pumps may play a bigger role. But globally, the renovation in the buildings in general, insulation plays a big role in terms of the as a source of employment. But heat pumps is very important, and in certain countries more important than the others. No question about that. Thank you.
Yeah. And I see Alan Brown has now joined us. Alan, are you there? No, you're not. Oh, you are. Did you want to put a question to Fatih, or
I'm there, yeah.
Just come in?
Yes, I can. Apologies that I'm so late. So, hi Fatih, it's a pleasure to see you. I was wondering about carbon capture and storage. The report on carbon capture is a wee bit more cynical in terms of the investment and innovation that's still to happen, and obviously thinks it's quite expensive, but it also ties it to abatement with coal. But meanwhile, there's a recommendation about switching from coal to gas. So is a logical step maybe not switching from coal to gas as an interim measure to reduce carbon dioxide, but then in the long term, the gas switching to carbon capture and storage? So obviously that's the aspiration in the UK, is carbon capture and storage and still utilising like North Sea gas.
So first of all, I should tell you why I think the carbon capture and storage is a critical technology. Now, today, the share of fossil fuels in the global energy mix today is 80%. And the share of fossil fuels in the global energy mix 30 years ago was also 80%. In the last 30 years, many things happened. Renewables became cheaper, much cheaper. The world became much more environmentally oriented. Many new political developments, summits, etc. The share of fossil fuels did not change. They stayed 30 years, 80%. We expect that they will decline, but still fossil fuels will be with us for years to come if we are realistic, if we follow what is happening in the emerging world, not only in Europe, not only in our own countries. And the technology which can be a bridge between the fossil fuels and the climate targets is carbon capture and storage. Now, on the other hand, carbon capture and storage is with us since a long time, but we have not seen that it became a mainstream technology. It will only be a mainstream technology if the governments would push it. If not, then we have to look at the other technologies, and in my view, our chances to reach net zero would be even more difficult, more challenging than it is today. So carbon capture and storage could be very helpful, but whether or not it will get from the governments the support it needed, it will get from the support from the governments that other technologies enjoyed in the last decade or so, such as solar and wind or electric cars, it is a question mark in my mind. But I believe acceleration of carbon capture and storage would be helpful to reach our international climate targets. Let me also mention this. We all know that the climate issue is a global issue. 1 ton of CO2 going to atmosphere from Liverpool or from Jakarta or from Detroit or from Johannesburg, it has the same effect on everybody. So therefore, we have to understand what is happening in the emerging world and what kind of energy mixes are there and what are the trends there in order to set our priorities, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Did you want to come back on that, Alan, or are you happy? Yeah, okay. And could I go?
I was happy with that. I mean, I think, sorry, just say, so it's clear then that with government investment, carbon capture is absolutely vital for net zero, but it's the governments need to step up.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Could I tax your brains, Fatih, about another issue that's really come to the fore rather more recently in the UK, and possibly could be a substantial part of green recovery, depending how it's done, and that is the emergence of the debate on hydrogen firstly as a vector fuel in the process, secondly as have the possibility of being injected into the gas grid system, and thirdly as a possibility of running the gas heating system entirely in due course, and in addition to perhaps having applications in rail transport, for example, where rail can't be electrified, having hydrogen trains, and also the role of hydrogen in perhaps large transport logistics. All of these are beginning to be discussed at a much more urgent level in the UK, and we've seen just recently that the German government, I believe, has put 9 billion forward for hydrogen development in that particular country. So what are your views about the role that hydrogen can now play in the low carbon economy?
And thank you very much. First of all, I should tell you the following. Theo, when he talked about what I have been doing in the past, mentioned, I work on energy issues almost now 3 decades, almost always with the governments. but I am also the chair of the Davos, the energy board. I was involved in many energy discussions, and I have rarely seen, if any, one technology that all the governments and businesses agree that this is this belongs to energy future. There are always different views on oil, solar, on nuclear power, carbon capture and storage, but all the governments around the world and the businesses think hydrogen is the future. US government, but Japan or Germany, Europe, everywhere. So why? I want to explain why. Because of the following. Hydrogen is very versatile. You can produce hydrogen from gas, coal, renewables, nuclear, all different fuel sources. This is number one. Number two, you can use hydrogen for many different end users. Transportation, industry, electricity, whatever you want. So this is the beauty of the hydrogen. Now, if it is so beautiful, if all the governments and business agree, what is the problem? Where is the problem? The problem is many problems, but if I had to choose one of them, it is still expensive, significantly expensive. Technology is there, but still expensive. So if I can go one step further, about 60% of the cost of hydrogen is from an equipment or machine, if I may call it, electrolyzer. Electrolyzer, 60%. An electrolyzer is not a rocket science. It is a piece of machine. By mass manufacturing, by learning by doing, we can bring the cost down and make the hydrogen affordable, and the cost can come down. So it is the reason now at least 3 countries around the world putting a lot of money to go for a mass manufacturing of electrolyzers and bring the cost down. Who are those countries? Europe, it gets a big mention, a big amount of money in Europe. Second, Japan. Third, China. These 3 countries. And many others as well, but they are putting a lot of money there. So, why it is so important, hydrogen? Why IEA? Because IEA made the landmark report in hydrogen in the G20 last year. Prime Minister Abe asked the IEA to put a roadmap. Why we are so excited? Because we know that in the electricity sector, there are already good things happening, mainly driven by the renewable energies. But we are talking about clean energy transitions, not clean electricity transitions. Electricity is only 20% of the total energy use. 80% is still there we have to decarbonize, such as the iron, steel, aluminum, petrochemical, trucks, and others. Therefore, hydrogen is, in my view, a very promising technology, and it is, in my view, ready for the big time. I think hydrogen is today here where solar and wind were 10 years ago.
I think that's absolutely right, but I think there's a bit of a debate in the UK on exactly what may be the best destination, should we say, for hydrogen use. I mean, there are issues concerning how you make the stuff, and big debate about whether it's blue hydrogen or green hydrogen. And my view is you've got to go straight to green hydrogen. Get on with that, and that does give you questions about how you get the combination of changes to the grid and the manufacturing of hydrogen in alignment, so that you've got your electricity available to make those to crack the hydrogen. So you've got it, to crack the water, so you've got the hydrogen available. I've got a question from Julia Sadichka, who questions if we are doing the sort of renovation that we're talking about of homes, whether hydrogen would then have a role in heating homes, or would it be, say, heat pumps plus energy efficiency will do the job? And can hydrogen then be concentrated on, I would say, rail and trucks and various other things such as that? Is that your view, or do you have a wider thought, particularly as far as the UK is concerned, for hydrogen?
Definitely, it can play a role for heatings at home. It can be used at home. Hydrogen, I am perfectly in line with the colleague who asked this question.
Yeah. So right. So you can. Yeah. Well, I don't know, Theo, if you have anything you would like to put to Fatih before we wind up today, because
may I join in, Alan?
Oh, Ben, hi. Right.
Hi, Alan. First of all, I want to thank you for stepping in. Unfortunately, Dr. Birol, in Parliament here, I was on a bill committee at late notice, which meant that I had to be in a committee. So I'm apologies for lateness. I just wanted your view, Dr. Birol, on how would you, if you were the UK and you were appointed as the head of COP26 from the UK, the president, what do you think the opportunity is for the UK running up to COP26, and what do you think we should really be focusing on in terms of our international climate diplomacy?
I think this is a very important issue. And to be honest with you, I work for about 40 governments around the world, but I said very clearly that when the UK was appointed as the chair of the COP, I said there couldn't be a better choice than UK. Why? Because you are a country which looks all the fuels, all the technologies. You are part of Europe. You have a very good relationship with many other advanced countries, advanced economies around the world, and you have a global view of the issues, not only looking at the UK. I think the UK government, UK colleagues, decision makers know that this is a global issue. The biggest challenge for me is that UK brings the major economies around the world in the same agenda. So just to start from small, Mr. Whitehead mentioned very much used expression now we all use, building back better. This is very good, but I would like to say building back better together. Together is very important here, because I think UK should give the message that UK sees this as a global issue and we work global. When we look at the COP in Paris 2015, one of the reasons for the success was US government at that time got China on board. US and China worked together to have an agreement. In my view, UK government should also focus one or two major emerging countries to be on board for a possible way forward. It can be India, it can be, I don't know, whatever the country that you are working on. But important thing is here, to understand that the needs of the developing countries are not only on the addressing the climate change, but also economic growth and also energy access. It is important that UK have this comprehensive view of the different countries around the world and bringing them together. The issue is here. Of course, we have about 1 year to come, more than 1 year for the COP26, but building a coalition of different countries around the world will be critical to have an ambitious target. And at the same time, I very much want to underline, Europe is very important today. Europe is playing a leading role. The Green Deal and the others, excellent, but let's not forget, Europe is today responsible for only 8% of the global emissions, 8%. 92% comes from somewhere else. UK has to go to China and India as much as they go to Brussels. So it is the reason to have a global view, to have a developing countries view, to have a sensitivity and empathy for those countries, but also engage with them, bring them on board would be, for me, the top priority and the top suggestion I would have for the UK colleagues. But I am sure you have a wonderful diplomats in the UK and lots of very clever decision makers. But I would put this agenda and the global picture on the table for the decision makers and for the government. Thank you.
Okay. Did you want to come back on that, Bim? I was trying to work out where you actually are from the wallpaper in front of you, but
yeah, unfortunately, it's not the wallpaper in my home. It's a wallpaper in one of our beautiful committee rooms here in Westminster.
I was trying to get the number right in my head.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean that was a very comprehensive answer. My only thoughts were that people always say that we need to work globally. The tough bit is if some of the global partners don't want, for whatever reason, to work with you. And what is your view, Dr. Birol, of the international appetite to do something major at COP26 from the countries from where the 92% of emissions emit from?
To be very frank, as we always are at the IEA, the appetite today for those countries to be the leader of the fight against climate change is very, very limited. It is not a big appetite. The big appetite is economic growth, big appetite is jobs, and clean air, which in most cases parallel to addressing the climate change. But what is helpful is that some of the technologies which will help to address the climate change, reduce the emissions, are becoming cheaper and cheaper, and therefore they will help to reduce the emissions and can be a part of the package. But from a political perspective, if I have to be honest, I wouldn't be telling the truth that the many major emerging countries puts the fight against climate change as one of the top 3 major preoccupations in their national economic agenda.
Well, I think we are more or less running out of time now. I think we've just got time for one more very brief question, if you're okay with that. And that is whether you've got any reflections, and this is a question that's come in, I think, from Hamish Wilson, about any particular instruments that you may think would be appropriate for bringing forward that energy efficiency agenda in homes and offices. So, I mean, particularly from your experience of perhaps other countries' efforts in this direction, are there particular ways in which it can be framed so that it does its best as far as getting to those targets are concerned? And obviously, you know, the win-win of countering fuel poverty, of making sure that we're using a lot less energy, and of course then we're moving to the net zero target. So are there particular instruments that you think would be applicable in this area and that you would recommend?
So very briefly, it can be government incentives or tax breaks for the home owners for the investments that they are going to make at home to improve their efficiency, improve the insulation. Just to why governments need to give such incentives, just to give a number, about from $1 you give such investments, 60% goes to labor costs to find jobs for the people, mostly unskilled labor. Therefore, government incentive in terms of tax breaks, in terms of the direct payment would be the main driver here. So financial incentives is the key word, I would say.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Fatih, for being with us today and giving such expert and comprehensive answers to our questions. I think you may vaguely recall that you were one of the, should we say, best witnesses we ever had in front of the old Energy and Climate Change Select Committee when I was a member of it, and made your acquaintance on several occasions with the brilliant expositions you gave us at those Select Committee proceedings, and you've certainly not disappointed us at all today. And I thank you very much indeed for your for both for your time and for your expertise in making that presentation today.
I thank you very much for inviting me, and anytime you need me, I am at your disposal, me and International Energy Agency, because the decisions that you are going to make, the discussions you are going to have in London will be very important for UK, a country I love a lot, and also for the world. I thank you very much for inviting me, and I am at your disposal if you need me again.
That's very kind of you to say, and thank you once again. And we've now got to wind up. I hope everybody who thought they were going to get a question in has got a question in, but if we've missed any out, we apologise for that.